The Chicago Bears should sign free agent center Connor Williams to fix multiple problems on their offensive line. But don't expect Ryan Poles to pull the trigger here, given how much he already has invested on the interior of the offensive line.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every day. That's right, there's something for everyone daily all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On the show today, we look at the free agent interest in center Connor Williams from the Miami Dolphins, who's recovering from a torn ACL. We got a big update from his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, about just how much progress he's making in his return and that he's got teams interested and that he'll be with somebody for training camp. So a lot of Bears fans have said, why not us? Why not get the center upgrade, who I think would be a good scheme fit and would be a big upgrade in this offensive line that ends up solving multiple problems with one free agent signing there that I think would be wise for this team to do. But I also don't think it's likely. I don't expect Ryan Poles is going to invest a contract in Connor Williams after all that he's invested in both Ryan Bates and Coleman Shelton, as well as what they already have invested in Nate Davis and Tevin Jenkins and this offensive line as a whole right now. I don't think he's going to go out and do another contract for another free agent center in the middle of this O-line, especially when we also have to consider other players that Ryan Poles may have his eye on in free agency instead. And you only have so much cap space to go around at this stage of the process. I do think it's clear, though, don't let anybody tell you Connor Williams wouldn't be, a good fit with the Chicago Bears offensive line. Obviously, okay, the from a scheme standpoint, because the fact that he's recovering from a torn ACL and is not going to be, 100% day one of training camp and therefore not able to work with Connor Williams, or work with Caleb Williams, right away. I will give you that's not ideal. That's not a great fit. Ideally, you have Caleb Williams working with the same center throughout the offseason and now picking up and continuing at that same center throughout training camp, so that quarterback-center exchange, relationship, and communication can all be at its absolute best. And with Connor Williams, you would not only be getting a late start on it now, but also it's not clear that he would be ready to go day one of training camp. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said originally they thought Connor Williams might not be ready to play until midway through the regular season this year, but said that his recovery has gone really well and that they're confident Connor Williams will be ready for week one and will be in someone's training camp here soon. Now, him being ready for week one does not mean he's ready for day one of training camp, and so I will certainly concede that makes it a little bit less than ideal there, and any player coming off an injury is always going to have some concerns there. But if you talk about fitting in this offense and on this roster, don't let anybody tell you Connor Williams isn't a scheme fit in that regard. In actual, when he's healthy on the field in this offense. You look at what the Dolphins were asking him to do as their center compared to what Shane Waldron's offense is going to ask him to do. Very similar in terms of, the running game and in pass protection and stuff. You look at the run concepts that the Dolphins and the Seahawks ran last season, pretty similar splits. The Dolphins ran outside zone about 48% of the time. Almost half of their runs were outside zone. The Seahawks were 40%. So a little, slightly less in Seattle. The Seahawks ran slightly more inside zone and slightly less outside zone compared to the Dolphins that were really inside zone heavy, but they ran about the same percentage of, man, gap scheme blocking plays like duo. Those were about the same percentages, and they all dabble in other schemes a little bit here and there, but both the Seahawks and the Dolphins were primarily outside zone and inside zone teams. The types of running plays that Connor Williams was blocking from center in Miami match pretty closely to what the Seahawks did last year, which is also not far from what the Bears did this past season as well. Like, he would fit how the Bears would run the ball, and certainly like pass protection is a little bit more, a little bit more fluid in that regard, and not so scheme specific for players to fit in here. So you could easily see Connor Williams coming to Chicago and not having any trouble picking things up offensively or asking him to do things differently than what he was asked to do in Miami or certainly in Dallas in previous stops before that. What is key is that Drew Rosenhaus said Connor Williams wants to go somewhere to play center. He played guard before with the Cowboys, isn't looking to go sign somewhere to play guard, but is going to sign somewhere to play center. And I think it could be a real boon to the Chicago Bears offensive line in ways that is beyond just upgrading at center. Like, first and foremost, Connor Williams is maybe the most talented free agent center that hit the market this offseason. The injury is the only reason he hasn't signed. But as far as like how guys played in 2023, Connor Williams is legit really good. He is a really good center. The Bears signed Coleman Shelton and Ryan Bates, who, have both been starting centers before, but are not high-end starting centers. So right away, when Connor Williams is healthy, he would be an upgrade over what the Chicago Bears have on their offensive line. He would just be a center upgrade as it stands right now. But beyond that, being able to get a surefire center upgrade in Connor Williams then gives you the flexibility with Ryan Bates and Coleman Shelton, but mainly Ryan Bates, to then move him around and solve some of your question marks at guard right now. We've talked earlier this offseason about how, Nate Davis missed more practice again and is kind of a remaining question mark about how consistent and reliable he can be for this team. We saw him miss games last season, and we've seen Tevin Jenkins be injured every season, at least a little bit every season. And so right now, your backup guards are, Jatari Carter, your 7th round pick from a couple years ago, or 6th or 7th round pick, or, they signed Matt Pryor from the 49ers. They signed a couple of street free agent type, minimum contract type guys that are not, that if you have to start them, are you screwed? No, but it's not great. But if you could insert Connor Williams as your unquestioned, he is your go-to starting center, and you can even say Coleman Shelton is your go-to backup center there, and then make Ryan Bates like your swing guard. Because Bates has started at guard before, and Bates has even filled in for Nate Davis at guard this offseason so far. When Davis was missing practice, Bates was the starting right guard next to Darnell Wright. And so if you could take Connor Williams and say, you are the center, and go to Nate, and then go to Ryan Bates and say, the moment Nate Davis or Tevin Jenkins goes down, you've got Bates ready to go as a plug-and-play backup guard with some starting experience that you can just feel a little bit more comfortable with than some of the other guys you had as depth there. Like, signing Connor Williams at the top at center pushes the rest of that depth chart down and moves Ryan Bates over so that you've got better options there if either of your guards gets hurt. And you also still have Coleman Shelton under contract, who can be your top backup center, who started all of last season for the Rams. If for some reason Connor Williams gets hurt again or something crazy, like, you've got a good backup center there, and you've got Ryan Bates available to be that top backup guard who most likely, odds are, one of the two of Jenkins or Davis is going to miss at least one game this season, and you're going to need somebody to fill in at guard. And I think Ryan Bates would be your best option on the roster right now, but not if he's also your starting center. Because then if he's your starting center and a guard goes down, then you got to move Bates over from center to guard and then Shelton off the bench. So you're changing two positions at the same time instead of just one, and it becomes that much messier. So like, Connor Williams would open that up for them. But I don't think it's likely that Ryan pulls the trigger and signs Connor Williams because of how much he already has invested in this interior offensive line. We'll take a closer look at what that looks like and why I don't think the numbers add up well for the Chicago Bears there next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's number one sportsbook. And just because the summer is a little bit of a slower month for sports, pretty much all baseball now that the Stanley Cup Finals are over, doesn't mean FanDuel is going to slow down with any of the fun, because FanDuel is making sure that all summer long, every single customer is getting a boost or a bonus daily. That even if you don't have a lot of sports on the TV, you can bet on all of the sports at FanDuel. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Whether you want to bet ahead on Bears-Titans week 1, or the Caleb Williams' rookie season passing yards or Rome Odunze's rookie season receiving yards, odds for offensive rookie of the year, or even Matt Eberflus for coach of the year. I mean, and plus there's a bunch of other sports internationally, soccer, et cetera, et cetera. They got it all at FanDuel with daily bonuses or boosts. So to start making the most out of your summer, head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Connor Williams would solve a lot of problems for the Chicago Bears, and he would be a scheme fit and an upgrade for this offensive line that it feels to me like there should never be no such thing. There should never be a such thing, or there is no such thing. I don't want to double negative here, as too much investment in the offensive line. But at the same time, I think Ryan Poles might look at that slightly differently and say, yeah, there's no such thing as too much investment in the offensive line, but like you do have a salary cap and you can only invest so much in so many places. You can't invest. There's no such thing as too much investment in any position, really. And you love to keep putting more and more salary cap space and money and resources into every position to make the offensive line better, the defensive line better, get another wide receiver, get more corners. I mean, of course, you'd like to continue to make the roster better, but at some point, you have to draw the line somewhere and say, okay, we've tried these 3 or 4 things here, and let's see how that plays out before we wave the white flag and say, all right, we got to go get Connor Williams, right? You know, like this is kind of what their plan, this was plan A, was Ryan Bates, Coleman Shelton, and then rolling with, Nate Davis and Tevin Jenkins at your guard spots. And like, they haven't given plan A a real chance yet. You know what I mean? Like they've had OTAs and minicamp. So it's not like, I don't know that you can sit here today and convincingly wave the white flag and say, oh yeah, they got that wrong and need to correct that with Connor Williams. I still would add Connor Williams to it, but it's not always that simple. Like they have a lot already invested in this interior offensive line, both financially, but also in terms of, draft resources as well. Like you think about signing Coleman Shelton in free agency and trading a 5th round pick for Ryan Bates. Like individually, okay, it's a 1-year deal for Coleman Shelton and it's only a 5th round pick for Ryan Bates. But having done both of them, right, that's like, we're going to attack the center position by doubling down on it. And so are they going to triple down with another outside player brought in late in this process? Like it feels to me like if they had just traded for Bates or just signed Coleman Shelton, maybe you could still see a little bit of a window here where they say, okay, well, they only did one thing and it wasn't that much of an investment for that one guy. But when you double it with Bates and Coleman Shelton, it's hard for Ryan Poles to sit here and think Ryan Poles is going to say, yeah, you know what? Let's go for number 3. Screw everything else we've already put in here. Connor Williams is just better, because like Connor Williams has been available this whole time, right? Like this ACL injury recovery thing is not like new news, right? He went into free agency knowing Connor Williams was hurt and might or may not be ready for week 1. That has not changed between now and today, right? It's not like Connor Williams just got cut by the Miami Dolphins and now there's a new center available that Ryan Poles hasn't been able to account for or couldn't plan ahead and think, oh, maybe this guy will be available later in the process. This has been a known quantity and option and could have been part of the plan from the start. He could have gone into free agency saying, we're gonna sign Coleman Shelton as a backup plan just in case, but we know we want Connor Williams and we're going to wait it out for Connor Williams and make sure that we get him before training camp when he's healthy. I mean, it's kind of where it feels like the defensive end position is right, where they kind of said, okay, they haven't addressed defensive end at all in free agency, but they've known in the back of their mind, Yannick Ngakoue, Emmanuel Ogbah, some of these other guys will probably still be around and they can still address it. And like that may have been part of the backup plan in their head from the beginning when they didn't end up signing anybody majorly in free agency. But with center, they knew Connor Williams would be available this whole time. They knew no one was going to sign him. He tore his ACL in week 11. So would that be like 4 months off of an ACL tear? Would have been March-ish. I don't know the exact date of when week 11 was, but like he wasn't going to sign in March. Like Ryan Poles knew that this whole process, Connor Williams was going to remain unsigned up to this point. So like that hasn't changed. There's not new information here or a change in what's available in the offensive line for Ryan Poles to then change his plan. He's had to plan with this as a known option throughout this process. And then you even just look like from a numbers standpoint, what the Bears have invested in this offensive line, in the interior in particular. Nate Davis's cap hit this season is $11.4 million. He's one of the highest paid guards in the NFL this season. Plus, Ryan Bates gets traded for with a $4 million cap hit this season. Coleman Shelton signs at a $3.5 million cap hit. Tevin Jenkins at the end of his rookie deal has a $2.7 million cap hit. I'm no math major, but that's over $20 million already invested in 4 of your interior offensive linemen, not including, the extra couple $1 million here and there that you already have invested in the other backups on the depth chart. But those are the big 4 guys: Davis, Bates, Shelton, and Jenkins. Adds up to over $20 million at those spots. So are you going to add Connor Williams, who is not going to be a veteran minimum contract by any means? I don't know what kind of salary cap number a really good center coming off an ACL signing in the summer is going to get, but it's not going to be a veteran minimum deal. I mean, I don't know if that is that $5 million, is that $10 million. I don't know, but it's that much more of an investment added to this interior of the offensive line that already has not only all this salary cap space to it, but then also the 5th round pick for Ryan Bates. He did use a 3rd round pick on Karan Amagaji, who could end up getting in the conversation on the interior of the offensive line at some point as well. There's draft pick investment, there's financial investment. Is Ryan Poles going to sit there and say, you know what, let's invest even more, again, before we've really truly seen how these investments are going to work out? Because there is a reality here, however confident you may or may not be in it, that Nate Davis stays healthy, Tevin Jenkins stays healthy, they both play well. Ryan Bates wins your center competition, or Coleman Shelton wins, and they're a pretty good center, and this offensive line is fine. That's the plan, right? That's what Ryan Poles is counting on. That was what he was going for with this. And we haven't yet seen that not be the case. We've seen Nate Davis miss some OTAs practices, but that's not the same as Nate Davis missing the entire season or being absent for big important moments during the year. And Tevin Jenkins has been healthy and participating. So nothing has gone fully wrong yet with the current plan. So what's Ryan Poles' incentive to change it yet? Because again, it's not like this center just became available and that's the change of plans. This center's always been able to be a part of the plan one way or the other. So that's why I just don't think Ryan Poles is going to pull the trigger on Connor Williams, even though I would, if I were general manager. I want to upgrade the center position. I want to make Ryan Bates a good swing guard with some good options here. Okay, 5th round pick and $7 million in those 2 free agents. I don't care. I want Caleb Williams to have the best possible offensive line for his development, because his development matters more than anything else. And giving him Connor Williams and being able to make Ryan Bates a swing guard, that aids Caleb Williams' development so much more. I hope I haven't been mixing up Connor and Caleb. Too many C. Williamses that we're talking about on the podcast today. You also have to consider, though, that the Bears only have so much remaining salary cap space. And Connor Williams is not the only free agent they're considering at this stage of the process. And you got to figure out, okay, do they have the money to add Connor Williams and address, say, the defensive line the way they might want to? Plus, you got to leave some money for trades and just other emergency money in the salary cap room. So it also doesn't seem like financially this is exactly what Ryan Poles wants to do right now. So we'll look at some of the salary cap considerations and where things stand with some of the other players the Bears might be considering in free agency next on Locked On Bears. Don't forget, all throughout the summer here, even in these slow months of the year, the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 live stream is here for you all day, every day, with great sports talk lined up for you with our local experts on the Locked On Podcast Network covering the top stories every single day. If you're tired of the argument television and screaming on ESPN and Fox Sports, check out Locked On Sports Today 24/7 on the Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel, or available for free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Chicago Bears are not low on salary cap space right now. They're estimated around $21 million of cap space, which is enough money to sign Connor Williams. He's not going to cost you $20 million. I don't know what he's going to cost, like we said earlier, 5, 10. I really don't have a sense of what value an injured good center has at this stage of the process. But I do know that Ryan Poles is also looking at other options to sign, particularly on the defensive line. We've talked a lot about Unique Ngakoue this offseason. We've thrown out guys like Emmanuel Ogbah and Calais Campbell before he signed with the Miami Dolphins, since we're keeping it with the Dolphins today. the Bears have been in on some of these conversations on edge rushers, and we'll see if they pull the trigger and what that looks like exactly. But that's going to cost cap space too. And all of a sudden, what becomes more important to you? Can you afford more than one? So the Bears, like our friends at Over the Cap, said the Bears have $21 million in cap space, give or take. If Ryan Poles is planning on signing an edge rusher, last season when they signed Yannick Ngakoue this time of year, it was a 1 year, $10.5 million contract. Do I think Yannick Ngakoue is going to get $10.5 million this year? Probably not, but you never know. I mean, all it takes is there being another team that wants him and a bidding war, and, do you want your defensive end or not, Ryan Poles, right? So, you have to account for one of these free agents is going to take some money. And, we heard Drew Rosenhaus, who we talked about updating us on Connor Williams' progress. He did an interview with a local TV reporter in Miami. That's where the information came from. Drew Rosenhaus is also the agent for Emmanuel Ogbah and had a little update on Ogbah. He's healthy. That's not an injury thing. But said Emmanuel Ogbah wants to play for a 4-3 team and not a 3-4 team, and thinks that was part of the problem last season. In Miami under Vic Fangio, he had to play outside linebacker instead of 4-3 defensive end. Ogbah wants to play 4-3 defensive end. So good chance that that fits with Chicago and only the 4-3 teams and not the other 3-4 teams. You're not going to be competing with them as much for someone like Emmanuel Ogbah, so that could help keep his price down a little bit. But Rosenhaus said, the big reason Ogbah hasn't signed yet is because of the money, that it hasn't been on the same page with other teams financially up to this point. So they've been kind of waiting it out because Ogbah had a pretty bad year with the Dolphins this past season. The production was way down, and so I think teams are looking to get a discount there, even though he's had some good seasons earlier in his career. And he's saying, no, that's because I was used wrong in that scheme. Put me in a 4-3 defense, I'll be good. So pay me more like that. And so they're waiting till training camp because then, leverage and et cetera, as teams get more desperate to get him in their building. So Ogbah's also going to be looking for money too. Is Ogbah going to get, again, $10 million a year, or even if it's a 1 year deal, but is he going to get a $10 million cap hit? I wouldn't quite go there, but I mean, I don't know, he, with his last contract with the Dolphins was at 17 and 11 the year before that, but signed, 7.5 the first couple of years. So I don't know where the money is there, but say you need to budget $10 million for one of these defensive ends, just in case. That cuts your Bears cap space from $21 million to $11 million. Okay, then how much money do you have to sign Connor Williams then? Because you're going to have to hold on to some money just in case. You have to go through the regular season with some cap space in case you need to sign guys off the street, or in case you get into trade negotiations for some other player somewhere else, or you have an injury and need to sign an emergency free agent off the street that's going to cost more than the veteran minimum, right? Typically teams want to keep at least $5 million in the bank. Ryan Poles has intended to keep 10 or 15 or $20 million in the bank, during these seasons. So if you have to budget, let's say hypothetically you have to budget 10-ish, give or take, for one of these free agent defensive ends. Maybe it's a little less, but that leaves you with $10 million in cap space. And so if you want to keep at least 5 as emergency money for a rainy day, that leaves you $5 million left. Is that enough to get Connor Williams? Maybe. I don't know, but it sounds like maybe not. I don't know definitively whether the Bears can afford to give Connor Williams the money he's looking for and sign a defensive lineman at the kind of money that they're looking for. If you want to make substantive upgrades to this team, it's going to cost you this time of year, and they might be able to, we don't know, but they might not be able to afford both Connor Williams and a defensive lineman. And if I had to pick which one's more important to this football team right now, or what's the bigger need, it's the defensive line, hands down. Your offensive line, you could probably get away with, all right, but your defensive line is really struggling. I know, okay, but Connor Williams would help Caleb Williams, which might be more important in the grand scheme of things, and I could hear an argument there, but the Bears aren't going to think that purely in these terms. What makes the Chicago Bears better for 2024? What's more important to their success this season? It's defensive end. Honestly, a defensive tackle too. I would love to sign multiple defensive linemen. And then if you're signing multiple defensive linemen, you're cutting even more into the salary cap space and having even less to then have left to allocate for Connor Williams. And so that's where this just gets a little complicated. Plus, if you think about you want to have some cap space for the end of training camp when teams do their 53-man roster cut down and they waive players. When you claim those players off waivers, you claim whatever contract they had as well. You're not negotiating a new deal for waiver claims. If they reach free agency, then you're signing them to a new deal. But if you claim them off waivers, you're getting that contract. That's what happened with Alex Leatherwood when the Bears claimed him, he was really expensive. And if they had used up all that salary cap space, signing a defensive lineman and Connor Williams at the time, the equivalent, they wouldn't have had the cap space to claim Alex Leatherwood, which again, not that Alex Leatherwood was a good move that panned out, but more so it would have prevented them from doing what they wanted to do in that regard. So maybe at the end of training camp or the end of the preseason, another good defensive lineman gets cut or a good offensive lineman gets cut and the Bears want to claim them on waivers. You got to have salary cap space for that too. So that's where I think a defensive lineman pretty likely to sign here between now and the start of training camp or early in the first few days of training camp. I think we're going to see the Ryan Poles sign somebody, whether it's Ngakoue or Agba or somebody else. Connor Williams, I just don't think he's going to pull the trigger. I mean, unless he comes at some kind of steal of a price and wouldn't be that much of an investment. But even then, I think Ryan Poles is going to be patient with Nate Davis and patient with Tevin Jenkins and have some faith and believe in Ryan Bates and Sheldon Coleman because that was plan A all along. And that plan A, at least at center, hasn't proven to be a failure up to this point. I'd love to hear what you think the Bears should do with the offensive line and with the salary cap space that they have. I mean, would you rather have Connor Williams or a defensive lineman, or should they just kind of let Connor Williams go somewhere else and recover elsewhere and roll with what they got on the offensive line? Let us know in the comments here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. You can also tweet us at Locked On Bears or post in the Locked On Bears Facebook group. However you do it, just make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're not quite full 5 days a week at this stage of the process in June. It's the slowest time of the year for us, so we slow down a little bit, but we'll ramp up to a full 5 days a week for training camp, which is just, 3 weeks away at this point. So it's going quickly, and I hope that in the meantime that the Locked On Bears podcast helps you find another way to bear down.